So, first of all, I'm going to talk about the key elements that you should consider whenever you are looking into a playtest. Um, so, when you're setting up a playtest, there's some key factors. First of all, we would look at what security will you need and what measures you might have to consider. So, it depends really on your IP. If you've got a sensitive IP, if you aren't announced yet, if you want the level of protection on your test to do with like NDAs. You could have, you could use Steam to generate keys, and then our platform, I'll talk a bit more about this later, sort of sends keys out to players, and you can see which player has which key. You could also look at things like setting up like a live event where you are. One of the things that we've done in the past is from the point of the player getting the key, we have like been on a video call with them all the way through the entire test. So we're observing their environment, we're observing them, and you can see them taking part in the play test. It's really just to give you that level of security to make sure that they're not going or anywhere or doing anything, whatever the case may be. So yeah, that's always a strong consideration. It's something I will touch on a lot more later. There's also testing a specific area. Will you need to instruct your participants? So you need to think about the actual test that you're running. Is it a usability test? Is it something that you're just testing the overall flow of the game, the user sort of interface, the core loop? The maybe you've released a feature that unlocks at a later stage in the game that you want to test. You need to think about how to structure the playtest with those in mind. So, if, for example, and again, this is something I'll touch on later, if you are looking at, say, a feature that unlocks a later level of progression, you will need to run a longer playtest by necessity. You need to think about your participants and how experienced they are, and like how quickly they're going to get to that area if they're starting from scratch. You'd be surprised, some participants will get there in minutes, it seems. Some of them will take a little bit longer, perhaps. We'll talk a bit more about that. I do have a case study about that. What kinds of survey you should use? So there's various different types of surveys. They all have merit in their own ways. You can look at benchmarking surveys for various points during a longer test, maybe a daily survey with all the same questions and a separate final survey with a couple of summary questions. There's various different options that you can have now. It's not something that I expand about a huge amount during this particular presentation. We have a really good article. It's the Survey Building 101 Playbook on the website. What I'll do, I'll send a link out to that afterwards. But surveys are a great tool for gathering feedback alongside our platform, and we have a lot of really cool inbuilt systems. One of the most recent ones is like using a survey template system. I think that's still in the works. But yeah, other than that, there's a couple of smaller ones like what kind of device or peripherals are needed, how your game will run on a variety of machines. One of the things that we see quite a lot whenever we're running tests for folk is, I think it might seem obvious, but in my experience, a lot of developers have maybe overlooked that testers have a massive range of different devices and machines and different setups and things like that, and it can be sometimes a bit challenging to get an audience that has the exact specification that a developer needs. We typically do it anyway, but think about like the sort of the game itself, or the project as it were, and how it'll run on specific machines. Like it's all very well and good having a 47-day with a 13th gen processor, the latest hardware, whenever you're developing on it. But if you get somebody that's like a 7 or 8 year old gaming machine, is it going to run on their device? You might want to think about optimization or how you can maybe assist that. And peripherals as well, so things like controllers, etc. Surprisingly, not everyone has an Xbox controller. It's shocking, I realize, but it's happened. So think about that sort of thing, and then what size of the game? How long will it take to download? Um, Something that's often overlooked as well. Like if a game is maybe a gig, 2 gig, most people will be able to download it, but you'd be surprised the amount of people that run out of hard drive space very quickly. Also, in terms of like multiplayer events as well, if you're wanting to run an event at 7 p.m., it's maybe worth considering starting it at half five, 6ish. Maybe in part of your initial screening for your participants, you think about you know, checking their download speeds and figuring out how long it's going to take them to download, and then getting a consensus overall and working it out that way. It's something that we've had in the past. We had a particularly big multiplayer event um, that the game was like 50 gig or so, 50, and we ended up getting players on like 2 hours early because some of their speeds they were a little less than others, and it took a little bit more time to get them downloaded. We got there in the end, but there was a lot of waiting around, to be honest. So something worth thinking about.